I'm going to roll, so you guys take it away.
Okay. So, Peter, if I were to ask you what you think the role of the artist is and how an artist can help bring a vision to the world to reflect where we stand and what we think and what we feel.
Mm-hmm. You know, in the 19th century, the kind of model of artists were Verlaine and Rimbaud. And their example of deranging their senses and taking drugs and being crazy was a reaction to the imposition of rationality that the bourgeoisie was imposing on all of society, leaving no place for the imagination and beauty and whimsy. But today, the bourgeoisie is psychotic, overindulgent, greedy, living blindly, taking the earth as its own, for whatever its purposes are. And I think that the role of the artist has to change. The role of the artist today is to manifest health and to manifest sanity and to manifest interdependence and to manifest our appropriate place in nature and to demonstrate that living within limits does not mean returning to squalor or the Stone Age. Actually, artists are used to dealing with limits. I mean, think of what Bach did with 88 keys, and then name me any piece of music that's comparable that was made on a synthesizer, which can make any sound in the world. So the artists are in the perfect position to teach people how to live within limits and how to turn those limits or the solutions to problems caused by those limits into beauty. And I think that that's going to be our dominant role, to get people away from the buying of wastefully manufactured goods, to get people away from buying their status by brands and to trusting the output of their imaginations and their innate human creativity to create a world that is sustainable and beautiful and elegant.
Do you have hope for people? Do you think that we are figuring it out, or do you think we're missing the message?
I think every generation is a life and death struggle between wisdom and ignorance, and there are no guarantees. We might make it, we might not. The earth doesn't really care. We care. All the wonderful things that humans have done will be undone by what humans have done. The dilemma is that I think we've placed our faith in intelligence instead of wisdom. And we've reached the limits of intelligence. We're in the situation we're in because of too much intelligence and not enough wisdom. And wisdom is the part of us that always sees the shadow side of everything, that knows that everything has a cost, that knows that there are limits, that knows that everything is interconnected. And the reason I became a Buddhist priest was because I've chosen to spend the rest of my life trying to be accessible to wisdom and to speak from that place, to offer that into public dialogue. That's something that artists do to some degree all the time in their work. They may not always do it in their life, but the freedom of their minds to see implied shapes, implied ideas, implied forms, and to draw out the ghosts and hidden aspects from the fissures of what they're doing is really the work of the artist. And they've tested artists' minds when they're working, and they've found that there's optimal communication between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. It's not like right hemisphere people are artists and left hemisphere people are mathematicians and computer wonks. It's the interplay, because you can't play the piano unless you have all the digital order of left brain activity and the empathetic analog kind of surround of right brain activity. So when I ran the Arts Council for Jerry Brown, this was our entire thesis, that artists were this huge reservoir of creative problem solvers in the culture. And we applied them to all sorts of problems, social problems, problems of aging, problems of prison, to bring the intuitions and the unseen and the unknown into solutions. And they were very successful.
I think that I relate trying to think out of the box. because I find that I've always been so frustrated in life when I've been sort of pushed along a thought stream and it doesn't feel intuitively right to me. And I feel, especially raising kids, that we don't give them the opportunity to trust that intuition and to form that wisdom, that there's no faith in that, that it's, like you say, all in the building of intelligence. And it ends up failing us because we churn the same stuff out. We don't encourage the out-of-the-box thinking that really taps into the soul, which will produce the solutions, I think, that we need to start thinking about if we're going to,
Well, I mean, if you were to look back at the Middle Ages, we would probably say that the overriding delusion of the Middle Ages was religion. It organized the society. Kings were answerable to the Pope. I mean, it was a whole world thought system. And then in the Enlightenment, we could say that the overriding delusion was rationality, science, logic. And then maybe starting in the Industrial Revolution, I think the paradigm shifted, and I'm certain that 100 years from now, if there are still people here, they'll look back and they'll say that our overriding delusion was greed. We've commodified everything. Money has become the source of status, the measure of all things. We no longer hold anything sacred. If you don't hold the ocean sacred, why not dump your shit and your garbage in it? If you don't hold the soil sacred, why not dump fertilizers and chemicals in it? And then you get an indivisible line. You start by not holding other people's children sacred and selling them tainted food and food with adulterants in it, but somehow it gets to your children too, and before too long, nothing is sacred. And that's a very hypnotic state. And I don't know if we're going to wake up from that in time or not. I just don't know. I see it, but there's no guarantees. What attracted me to this project was here was a perfect creative solution to a very practical and tangible problem. The coral reefs in the Yucatan are dying. How do we move the divers away? How do we give them something diverting? How do we create a message? How do we do it? And some guy dreamed up this wacky, lovely idea and engaged a lot of people. So look at all the problems that he had to solve. He had to solve the creative problem. Then he had to solve the technical problems of making this stuff last underwater. Then he had to solve all the social problems of moving through all the strata of the society and getting the permits and the possibilities and making the museum. And this is second nature to artists because creative problem solving is what we do all the time. And we don't differentiate between solving a problem of creating tones that will create distance on a canvas or creating a problem with the mayor of a small town.
Yeah, so true, isn't it? So I'm going to stick to being an artist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very powerful. I wouldn't trade
I'm
it.
gonna just stick with it.
Yeah.